You think you know your dog, but what is a dog really? A biological creature? An ecological player? An emotional and cognitive being? A behavioral masterpiece shaped over thousands of years. I am Donna Hill, naturalist and dog lover, and I can't stop wondering about dogs. Welcome to Dogs Explained, where curiosity is the leash and every episode takes us somewhere new. The more we understand, the more remarkable they become. Let's discover dogs together. Have you ever watched your dog do something so strange, so deliberate, that you thought, okay, there is something going on in that furry little brain that I don't fully understand? Maybe they started spinning in circles, or tossing a toy in the air, or doing this weird bouncy dance right in front of another dog, and you just stood there thinking, what are you doing? Well, today we're going to explore that mystery, because what you might be witnessing, and what I watched my own dog do recently, has a name. It's an ancient behavior that goes back thousands of years. It's been used by wild animals to outsmart their prey. It inspired hunters to breed entire dog breeds around it. And it raises some really fascinating questions about how dogs think and solve problems. And somehow, my dog may have figured it out all on her own. Stay with me, because this one is wild. Okay, let's paint a picture. Imagine you're a duck. You're floating on the lake, minding your own business, when you notice something on the shore. There's a flash of movement, darting back and forth along the water's edge, jumping, spinning, almost playing. Now here's the strange part. You know you should probably swim away, but you don't. Instead, something in your brain goes, "What is that?" And you start swimming towards it. This is the mystery. Why would a prey animal move towards something on the shore? And what is drawing them in? The answer is a behavior called tolling. The word comes from Middle English and simply means to entice or draw in. And hunters have been exploiting it for centuries. Though exactly how and why it works is still a subject of genuine debate. Here's what we do know. Waterfowl are attracted to motion. Hunters have understood this for a very long time. It's why they use flags, decoys, with battery-operated flapping wings, decoys pulled through water on a cord to create a wake, and splashing. Movement near or on the water draws ducks and geese in. That is well established and widely practiced. Some researchers suggest that waterfowl may interpret certain kinds of movement as other birds of their own species, which would explain why they approach rather than flee. Others point to predator inspection behavior, a documented phenomenon in birds and fish where animals actually approach a potential threat to gather information about it. Both of these are plausible explanations, and they both may be partly true depending on the situation. What draws waterfowl in most reliably appears to be motion itself. The wake, the splashing, the back and forth movement along the shoreline. The official breed standards for the Nova Scotia duck tolling retriever emphasize the dog's playful action, retrieving desire, and tail motion as the keys to tolling effectiveness. Behavior over appearance. Experienced hunters report that dogs of various colors, red, black, and white, can toll effectively. However, whether coat color plays any role at all has not been formally studied, and some sources do suggest the toller's white markings may contribute. So the honest answer is that behavior clearly matters, and the color probably matters less than behavior, but we don't yet have the research to settle it definitively. Hunters have also observed other behaviors that may fall under the broader umbrella of tolling. Dogs swimming in circles or moving repeatedly through the water in ways that seem to attract rather than scatter waterfowl. Whether these qualify as true tolling is debated, but they point to an interesting possibility. That tolling may not be one single behavior, but a whole family of motion-based strategies that canines have developed, intentionally or not, to draw birds in. Now here's where we get into territory that is fascinating but less certain. You've probably heard the story that Nova Scotia duck-tolling retriever was bred to mimic the hunting behavior of red foxes. That hunters observe foxes dancing and playing along the shorelines to lure curious ducks within ambush range, then selectively bred dogs to replicate that behavior. It's a compelling story, and fox tolling behavior has been described by naturalists. But I want to be transparent with you. The direct link between fox behavior and the deliberate development of the toller breed is not well documented. It's a narrative that gets repeated often in breed histories, but the original evidence behind it is thin. It may be more folklore than verified fact. What is more likely, and what experience hunters suggest, is that the toller was developed because certain dogs showed a natural tendency to run up and down shorelines, play with objects, make yo-yo-like swims, or use a distinctive whining bark that attracted waterfowl. Hunters would have noticed which dogs were most effective at drawing birds in and bred from those individuals. Over generations, that trait would have been refined and intensified. That's a far more plausible explanation for how a tolling breed developed, and it doesn't require a fox to be the inspiration. The honest answer is that nobody alive today knows exactly how the tolling tradition developed, and much of the oral history and hunting tradition around it has been lost. What we're left with are compelling theories, and we should hold them as theories rather than facts. Foxes aren't the only wild canines observed using movement to their advantage around other animals. Pairs of coyotes have been observed, including by city park staff in urban areas of British Columbia, using the behavior that may function similarly, one luring curious or playful dogs closer before the dynamic shifts. I've personally witnessed this behavior in the field. Whether it qualifies as true tolling is open to question, but it suggests that using movement and play as a strategy may be more widespread among canids than we realize. What we do know is that hunters developed dogs specifically for this purpose, and it worked. The Nova Scotia duck tolling retriever is the most well-known tolling breed. There's also the Dutch Kooikerhoendje, a smaller European breed used for centuries to lure ducks into elaborate cage traps called Indenkooi. That practice dates back to the 17th century Holland. The earliest written record of dogs being used for tolling in North America comes from a French explorer named Nicolas Denis, who documented the practice in 1672. So, whatever the exact origins, this is an ancient and cross-cultural hunting tradition. Motion draws waterfowl in, and humans figured out how to use dogs to create that motion deliberately. Okay, here's where I come clean about my own dog. She's a triple herding mix, and herding breeds are not typically tolling breeds. But here's an interesting footnote. Some historians believe that farm collies may have been part of the early heritage of tollers. So maybe herding blood and tolling instinct aren't as far apart as we thought, and my girl may be an example of that. Shortly after we got her as an adolescent, she did something that stopped me in my tracks. My senior dog, a very old girl who had reached that stage of life where the world wasn't quite as exciting and wasn't interested in playing. She wasn't grumpy about it, she just had that "I'm ignoring you" look that very senior dogs get, like she was content to simply exist. My herding mix would come up to her, she'd look back at her, and my herding mix would walk away. Normal, right? But then she'd come back, and this time she'd start bouncing, spinning, tossing toys, and picking them up again. Acting absolutely unhinged, right in my senior dog's field of view. Not jumping on her, not nudging her, just performing. After a few minutes of this, my senior girl would take a few steps toward the invitation, and then they'd play. Now, was she tolling her? I think so. But I'll be honest, it's my interpretation of what I observed. What I can say with confidence is that she figured out, on her own, that direct engagement wasn't working. But making herself fun and unattainable? That worked. Whether you call it tolling or simply creative problem solving, something deliberate was happening. And when you think about it, it makes total sense. Herding dogs are wired to read other animals and adjust their behavior to influence movement. They don't use force, they use position, timing, and body language. This is incredibly close to what tolling is. The toolkit is the same, she just applied it in a completely new context. And here's something that adds yet another layer to this. My father had a little border collie who would swim out to retrieve her toy on a city pond, right through the middle of a flotilla of ducks, without a single bird moving away. They simply didn't react. Which tells us something important. Waterfowl that regularly encounter dogs, people, and activity can become desensitized to movement. That means the tolling response isn't purely hardwired instinct. Experience and context matter on the prey side too. A wild duck on a remote lake and a city park duck are essentially living in different behavioral worlds. Which brings us to the real takeaway from all of this. Tolling isn't just a hunting trick. It's a window into how dogs and wild canids think. It shows us that they don't just react to the world, they read it. They problem solve, they adapt. They look at a situation, figure out what's not working, and try something completely different. The fox figured out it couldn't catch the duck by chasing it, so it danced instead. My herding mix figured out that she couldn't engage her older housemate head on, so she put on a show. And here's the thing. Your dog might be doing this too. That weird zoomy session in front of the other dog, that bouncy theatrical display right before the play starts, it might not be random at all. It might be your dog hacking into another animal's instincts, just like the fox on the shoreline has been doing for thousands of years. Pay attention, because your dog might be smarter than you think, and a creative problem solver working right under your nose. That's it for today's episode of Dogs Explained. If you caught your own dog tolling, whether it was luring another pet, a wild animal, or even a person, drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear about it. Every episode leaves us with more questions than answers, and I think that's exactly the point. Dogs have been living alongside us for thousands of years, and we're only now beginning to ask the questions to understand them. If you want to keep exploring, hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, join me in observing our dogs closely. They're trying to tell us something.